Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jack Daly, Director of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 celebration. Please rise for the presentation of the colors and the playing of the national anthem. The color guard is from the Military District of Washington, and the brass quintet is from the United States Air Force. March on the colors. All right, ladies and gentlemen, how about a big hand for the Military District of Washington Color Guard and the United States Air Force Brass Quintet. Please be seated. We want to thank the Color Guard and the band for the inspiring performance, a fitting beginning for tonight's historic celebration. The relationship between the Smithsonian and NASA can be traced to the space agency's early history. In 1966, a cooperative agreement established the Smithsonian as the official repository of the nation's space artifacts. James E. Webb was the NASA administrator, and S. Dillon Ripley was the secretary of the Smithsonian. 3 years later, on today's date in 1969, the first human mission to land on the moon, Apollo 11, succeeded in a way that galvanized the attention of people everywhere. Apollo 12, the second mission put humans on the moon, occurred later that year, and Apollo 14 through 17 followed through 1972. Project Apollo was a bold, optimistic initiative carried out brilliantly by a team made up of experts from NASA, private industry, the academic world. This coalition truly transformed the world. We are proud to have many of the artifacts of the Apollo program in the National Collection, including the Apollo Command Module Columbia, which is right here next to us. We value our continuing partnership with NASA. 1 year ago, the Smithsonian Institution welcomed the 12th Secretary, G. Wayne Kloff. Over the past year, Dr. Kloff has gotten to know the institution's 19 museums, 20 libraries, 9 research centers, the National Zoo, and has traveled to additional Smithsonian operations throughout the world. Dr. Kloff's vision includes renewal and rethinking of the institution's role in the life of the nation and the world. His priorities include engaging new audiences and harnessing the latest technology to achieve the institution's founding mandate, which is the increase and diffusion of knowledge. As a scientist, Dr. Kloff has a practitioner's perspective of the institution's commitment to research. As an engineer, he understands the critical role technology plays in attaining goals as ambitious as those required for space exploration. Dr. Kloff has shown great support for the National Air and Space Museum and our mission to commemorate the history of flight and to educate and inspire people about the science and technology of aviation and space. It is my great honor to introduce the 12th Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, Dr. G. Wayne Kloff.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jack, and welcome everyone to the Smithsonian and this exceptional museum and all the people here who make this a wonderful place. We are extremely pleased to be part of NASA's 40th anniversary celebration of the Apollo 11 moon landing. We welcome all our special guests from Congress, the administration, the diplomatic corps, industry, the entertainment business, the military, NASA, and Earth. I want to especially thank NASA for the wonderful and rich partnership that the Smithsonian and NASA have shared for many years. Together, we continue to explore space for its clues to our place in it and for the origins of the universe. Last night, I was honored to be here in this museum for the John Glenn Lecture to hear Chris Kraft, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, and Neil Armstrong tell us firsthand about that bold journey that three men took to the moon on the Apollo 11 mission. Although there were other missions, including Apollo 11, only 12 people ever set foot on the moon. For the rest of us who want to see what it feels like, I recommend to you our newest exhibition, Alan Bean, painting Apollo, first artist on another world. It's an absolutely magnificent exhibition. Alan? All those of my generation were affected by the space race and by President Kennedy's bold vision to land an American on the moon. For those of us like me who studied engineering and science, the launch of the Russian satellite Sputnik changed the curricula we studied. For those of us like me who went on to teach at a university, it changed the way we taught our students. For all Americans, Apollo 11 changed the way we viewed ourselves. And for all of the world, it changed the way we view our planet. Many would argue the moon landing was the defining moment of the 20th century. Others might point to the seminal flight of Wilbur and Orville Wright in 1903. Here in one of the world's greatest museums, we celebrate both of those incredible accomplishments, as well as those of other courageous, visionary men and women throughout our history who have dared to defy the odds and gravity. We know that it is our sacred mission at the Smithsonian to use these stories to inspire boys and girls to dare to think that they can become the next Orville or Wilbur Wright or the next Neil Armstrongs, Buzz Aldrins, or Michael Collins of the future. 5 centuries ago, Leonardo da Vinci sketched and described a flying machine that was very much like today's helicopters. Da Vinci wrote then, "Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward. For there you have been, and there you will always long to be." At this museum, we believe you can see and experience that simply by looking skyward and seeing the great objects here to celebrate flight. Thank you for joining us this evening, and enjoy the ceremony.
It is the first human footstep on the moon, and the world is forever changed.
Fantastic feeling. It was one of great accomplishment.
It was almost miraculous.
We did come in peace for all mankind.
For eons, the moon is Earth's only satellite, orbiting our planet in a silent vigil. But the hush of space is broken in 1957 by Sputnik, an agent of the Soviet Union.
Immediately, everyone thought, well, they're now able to really send their military machines around the world.
In 1961, Yuri Gagarin scores another Soviet victory as the first human in space. The U.S. answers a month later when Alan Shepard flies the first mission of the Mercury program.
This nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
Project Mercury is the first small step towards meeting the president's audacious goal.
The single most important factor was that man could survive and perform as well at zero gravity as he could at 1G.
0G, and I feel fine.
Gemini was our attempt to bridge our lack of experience from Mercury. We set out, number one, to rendezvous in space, to dock with another vehicle in space, to have a controlled reentry with a computer, and to do extravehicular activities.
Gemini 12, Houston, Capcom, new EVA record, beautiful job.
2 months after the final flight of Gemini, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee are preparing to be the first Apollo astronauts. On January 27th of 1967, the crew is in the capsule, conducting a countdown rehearsal. America's space program suffers a piercing loss of life. 20 months later, with a redesigned capsule, Apollo 7 roars off the pad for an 11-day shakedown.
What was a disaster with Apollo 1 turned out to be a real triumph with Apollo 7.
We have liftoff.
The original plan was for Apollo 8 to be an Earth orbit test, but the lunar module wasn't ready. And so the decision was made to actually do a circumnavigation of the moon.
We were the first 3 people to leave the confines of the Earth and be captured by another body. First time 3 people saw the far side of the moon live, and the first time that we saw the Earth from 240,000 miles away.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
During Apollo 9's 10-day mission in Earth orbit, the first lunar module is put through its paces. The machine is now ready for lunar orbit.
This is really a rugged planet.
But the Apollo 10 crew will not get moon dust on their boots. The mission is to test the approach to a lunar landing.
Roger, fantastic, Charlie, fantastic.
I felt like I had to pick up my feet to keep from dragging my heels on the top of those mountains.
We'll see you right on the other side in orbit.
Apollo 11 Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Buzz Aldrin will be the first crew to attempt a moon landing. Moon fever is rampant.
10, 9, ignition sequence start.
When that rumble came across the ground, it was like somebody was putting their hands on your chest and pressing. and I was cheering just like everybody else was.
Capcom, we're go for landing.
As the LEM pitches into an upright position about a mile above the moon's surface, Armstrong sees a field of boulders. He takes control, with fuel running out.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward.
At 60 seconds, we're still 100 feet up. I was nervous. Okay, at 30 seconds, we were 10 feet. I figured we had it made.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. I'm going to step off the LEM now.
Neil Armstrong steps off the footpad of the lunar lander and ends the race to the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. It came in peace for all mankind.
Liftoff.
NASA launches 6 more missions to the moon.
I don't know what happened here. We had everything in the world drop out. I'm not sure we can get hit by lightning.
Apollo 12 overcomes a lightning strike at launch to execute a pinpoint landing near the Surveyor 3 probe.
When we landed, and the first thing Pete did when he got out was go around and looked and see if Surveyor was in that crater.
Go Surveyor, yes sir. Does that look neat?
Apollo 13. Astronaut James Lovell's second trip to the moon.
Houston, we've had a problem.
The explosion of an oxygen tank in the service module has damaged several key systems.
We never had discussed the possibility of not surviving or getting back to the Earth. It was probably in all of our minds.
With a crippled command module, they have to make their way back to Earth using the lunar module dubbed Aquarius.
Under Apollo 13, this is recovery, and your chutes look good.
The safe return of Apollo 13 will always be remembered as the space team's finest hour.
There's good stuff. Okay, down, looking great.
Alan Shepard returns to spaceflight 10 years after becoming America's first astronaut to command Apollo 14.
I'm going to try a little sand trap shot here.
He also manages to become the first golfer on the moon.
Miles and miles and miles.
2 miles is all the Apollo 14 astronauts are able to walk.
It's kind of like wandering around in the sand dunes, and one sand dune looks about like the other.
But Apollo 15 has wheels.
This is really a rock and roll ride, isn't it?
The crew drives 17 miles with the rover, exploring many interesting sights.
Come on out here and give me a salute. Big Navy salute.
Apollo 16 is the 5th time an American crew explores the lunar surface.
Here he comes, folks. He's got the hammer out.
Science was certainly in the front seat. Of the 6 landings on the moon, the last 3, I think, were devoted completely to the science of it.
Dig you a little trench here.
Apollo 17 is the program's final mission to the moon. It lands in the narrow valley of Taurus Littrow.
That was the only chance we were going to have to really get that intimate a look at that kind of geology.
There is orange soil. Well, don't move it till I see it.
As the last Apollo astronaut on the moon, Commander Gene Cernan looks into the future.
This valley of history has seen mankind complete its first evolutionary steps into the universe.
Back there is the Earth. The multicolored blues of the oceans and the whites of the snow and the cloud you see from pole to pole. Across oceans, every 12 hours you look at the other side of the world. It truly is an ongoing, overpowering experience.
Ignition. Right away, Houston.
Today, we're on our way back to the moon, when crews make new footprints on that dusty surface. They will stay longer, explore farther, and learn more than could ever be hoped for on that July day in 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made that breathtaking first landing.
Whether it's my foot on the moon or one of my classmates or, you know, somebody from my generation is going to do it, and I think it's great.
We can actually really explore the moon. It's a whole new planet, a whole new world to go explore.
And as the centuries unfold, we'll go many, many places, but this is the first, and this needs to be remembered as one of the wonderful things of the 20th century. It is a great adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for the evening, astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the National Air and Space Museum, a museum unlike any other place on this planet. If you have visitors from another country and they want to know what single museum best captures what it is to be American, this is the museum you send them to. With the right flyer, Spaceship One, do it, do it. The products of exploration, people risking their lives, their health. Not everyone does that, only a subset of those of us who are human. And I am glad to be part of a species that has that subset. Because without it, you don't end up going anywhere. We're here to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the moon landing. And there's something about the number 40. I don't know if you've thought this through. 40. That's a big number. I'll tell you why it's a big number. How many days was the Ark at sea? 40 days, and in case you didn't know, it was also 40 nights. How many years was Moses wandering the desert? 40 years. It's not accidentally 40. 40 is a long time. It is longer than a generation. 40 years. What happens after 40 years is that people pass on. And you try to celebrate the 50th and there's nobody left. People who celebrate it, they have to, well, I read about it in a book, okay, I'll clap, but I'm on to other things. So it may be that this 40th anniversary is the most significant we will ever have of the Apollo era. So do not miss a moment of this evening tonight. I just want to emphasize that for you. We know that the Apollo era, it stoked a pipeline of ambitions. We know this. Many of us are here because of that. But I need to tell you, the struggle is not over. Okay? Not everybody was part of that vision. Not everybody was taken by it. And I blame us for that. Because you feel it, you know it. You know that majestic journey into space. You know it and understand it, yet there are people out there who don't. Can't even thought about it. You know, 2/3 of everyone in the world today was born after 1969. 2/3 of the world. Do you know the show formerly known as Jay Leno? Do you remember he used to do jaywalking? Remember that? Jaywalking, he'd go out in the street and ask a simple question of people who we think should know better. He went to freshly minted graduates out of college, went up to a woman and asked, "How many moons does Earth have?" Her reply was, "How do you expect me to remember that? I had astronomy 2 semesters ago." Scares me. Before we begin tonight's program, I want to do something that will practically make me misty-eyed. I want to singularly recognize the first generation of our space explorers. When I call your mission, will the astronauts and the families of the astronauts of those missions please stand and be recognized? From the Mercury program, will astronauts Senator John Glenn and Scott Carpenter stand and be recognized along with their families? Did we lose them? There we go. And the families of the other Mercury astronauts. Families and astronauts, please stand. Gordon Cooper, Alan Shepard, Deke Slayton, Gus Grissom, Wally Schirra. We will skip Gemini, not because it wasn't significant, but because everybody who was in Gemini also flew in either Mercury or Apollo. Will the following Apollo astronauts and their families please stand to be recognized? Wally Schirra, Don Isley, Walt Cunningham, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, Bill Anders, Jim McDivitt, David Scott, Rusty Schweikert, Gene Cernan, John Young, Tom Stafford, Pete Conrad, Dick Gordon, Alan Bean, Jack Swigert, Fred Hayes, Alan Shepard, Stuart Russa, Edgar Mitchell, Jim Irwin, Al Warden, T.K. Mattingly, Charlie Duke, Ron Evans, Senator Jack Schmidt, and finally the crew from Apollo 11 and their families, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. Heroes of a generation. And anyone who's lived the time knows they're heroes who never flew. They're people who mattered to us as a nation. People who will be sadly missed. In particular, Walter Cronkite, who passed away just this past Friday at age 92. You know, I was originally saddened when I learned that, and I said, the guy was 92. I wish I could live that long. When you're that old and you die, it's not an occasion to be sad, it's an occasion to celebrate a life. The most trusted man in America, supporter of space. We all knew this. He anchored the evening news with intelligence, integrity, and compassion to everyone who watched CBS News. Let's check out a video to stir our memories of this wonderful man.
July 20th, 1969 is, I'm sure, is going to be perhaps the one historical date that children, 500 years from now, will recognize.
What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
Disneyland in California.
People from all walks of life, all corners of the world, and come together to watch that historic moment. We're home.
413 is in.
Man on the moon.
And I was just speechless.
You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Congratulations.
What an honor it is to share the same room even with these heroes. All of you heroes whether you were back there screwing on bolts or out there in space with your names in the headlines.
Godspeed, Walter Cronkite. You know, I remember when I was a kid and I first learned that there was someone with the name of Cronkite. Do you know anyone else named Cronkite other than Walter Cronkite? I don't think so. So the name was kind of interesting to me because I knew enough about the periodic table of elements that it sounded like it was some new kind of element. You know, there's aluminum and then there's Cronkite, you know, made of Cronkite. What must it be? And one of my most indelible memories of Walter Cronkite, I remember I was 9 years old. It was 1968, Apollo 8, which I think is not as strongly remembered as perhaps it should be. It was the first time anyone ever left low Earth orbit. It was the first time anyone ever had a destination other than Earth in their sights. Apollo 8, left low Earth orbit, translunar injection, did a figure 8 around the moon and came back, one loop. I remember Walter Cronkite said at 4:14 this afternoon, or whatever time it was, the Apollo 8 command module has just left the gravitational pull of the Earth. And I thought about it and I said, well, wait a minute, Walter. If they're on the way to the moon, and the moon orbits Earth, then he can't have left Earth's gravity yet. So I'm thinking this, so did he get that wrong? I would later learn, of course, he's referring to that Lagrangian point between Earth and the moon, where you cross over that point, you fall towards the moon instead of falling back towards Earth. And so at that point, you can sort of colloquially say you've left the gravitational influence of the Earth. But that's my earliest memory of Walter. I learned a bit of physics from him. My first time learning about one of the Lagrangian points where the forces that operate on your position cancel. So once again, Godspeed, Walter Cronkite died on the anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission. Apollo 11 had already been launched in its 40th anniversary, so what a way to go. Walter Cronkite. It's a busy week. We lose Walter Cronkite. We gain some appointments. Did you see the Senate confirmations? I did. It was great. They were there. They were. United States Senate confirmed a new NASA administrator and a new deputy administrator, Charlie Bolden and Lori Garver. Let me let me give you some bio first. Save some of that. I'll give you some bio. Okay, Lori Garver. By the way, her whole life has been in space. She's a space cadet. Now she's space deputy, right? So it's started working for John Glenn in 1983. She was director of the National Space Society. She was NASA's associate administrator for policy and plans in the Clinton administration. She was a full-time consultant as president of Capital Space. She was a civil space policy advisor for the 2008 Obama campaign. Lori, I've known her for 15 years, ever since I had a relationship with the Planetary Society, an organization originally founded by Carl Sagan. She was an advisor to the Planetary Society for many years. And I've got to know her, and she's the right person in the right place at the right time. And I look forward to seeing what she can do in the role of deputy administrator. So now, let us welcome Lori Garver into the NASA family. Lori, where are you? Here she goes, Lori Garver. Thank you. Now we got Charlie Bolden. I've known Lori Garver for 15 years. I've known Charlie Bolden for 15 minutes. We basically just met in the green room. The man is looks like he came out of Central Casting when you look at what he brings to the table here. 4 decades in public service. He was a combat pilot for the Marines, combat pilot, spent 14 years as a member of NASA's astronaut corps. The man is pedigreed. Like you're looking around and say, that man, that's who we want. Wait. Let's take a look at what Charlie's done as a NASA astronaut. We've got some video of this. Let's check it out. Because we know from 1986 to 1994, he traveled in space 4 times aboard the shuttle, commanding 2 missions. My personal favorite of those missions is April 1990 on Discovery, as he and his crewmates deployed the Hubble Space Telescope. 1994, he commanded the first joint US-Russian space shuttle mission, involving the participation of a Russian cosmonaut as a mission specialist member of the crew. Now, I saw the confirmation hearings. It was a love fest at the beginning there. I don't know if you caught it. Senators from Texas and from South Carolina. I said, he's the man. So we could go have a beer now, Like, what are we waiting for? Charlie is approved, confirmed by the Senate, as the 12th administrator of NASA. There have been only a dozen. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Charles F. Bolden, Jr.
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Neil, for the great introduction. It's a privilege to be here tonight. I would like to take a moment to thank the National Air and Space Museum for hosting this tremendous event, as well as last night, which was incredible. Those of you who were here, I think you understand what I mean when I say it was incredible. It has been an incredible weekend, starting with the National Symphony at the Kennedy Center on Saturday night, and it's just special. Let's give everybody, especially the National Air and Space Museum, a big round of applause. I also would like to thank all of the many very distinguished guests who are in attendance this evening. We are honored by your presence. And last, but certainly not least, I would like to thank the Apollo astronauts and all the astronauts who are here tonight. We are here to celebrate your achievements, Apollo astronauts. The Apollo astronauts are heroes in the truest sense of the word. Their dedication and bravery in exploring part of President Kennedy's new frontier was a pivotal moment in human history that still will be celebrated thousands of years from now. On July 20th, 1969, I was a 22-year-old Marine second lieutenant. I was in flight school, and I was several years away from going to Southeast Asia. I had graduated from the United States Naval Academy a year earlier in 1968, a year of tremendous turmoil and upheaval, the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy. There were riots across the country, including here in Washington and at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. The nation appeared to be coming unhinged. I remember in the midst of the horror and unrest, 1968 ended on a hopeful note, when Apollo 8 orbited the moon and on Christmas Eve read the first 10 verses from the book of Genesis. The Apollo 8 astronauts also took the legendary Earthrise photo. That flight did more to unite the country and the world than any other event that year. The Apollo 8 mission helped set the stage for Apollo 11 6 months later. 40 years ago today, I remember watching the moon landing from the bachelor officer's quarters with my wife Jackie at the Naval Air Station, Meridian, Mississippi. It was a Sunday, and as a naval aviator, a group of us had just returned from New Orleans. We had had a weekend of revelry. However, we returned and gathered to watch this historic event. As was the case with most Americans and other people from around the world, it inspired me to explore. And although I never dreamed of becoming an astronaut at that time, I set off on a course that would eventually bring me here today. 4 decades after Apollo 11 landing, it is clear Apollo's legacy goes far beyond the moon rocks we brought back from the lunar surface. Besides inspiring me, Apollo inspired a generation of Americans and other young people around the world to study mathematics and science and pursue careers in aerospace-related fields. Young people helped build Apollo, and you would be hard-pressed to find an engineer at NASA old enough to remember the Apollo landings who doesn't put it near the top of the reasons that he or she came to work here. One of our challenges at NASA today is to inspire this generation of young people the way Apollo inspired us. Other impacts of Apollo are even more profound. In some ways, Apollo fundamentally changed how humankind views its place in the universe. The Apollo 8 Earthrise picture was called by a prominent photographer the most influential environmental photo ever taken. Former Vice President Al Gore said, and I quote, "That one picture exploded in the consciousness of humans. Within 18 months of this picture, the environmental movement had begun," unquote. The image showed Earth, according to the Apollo 8 crew, and I quote them, like a Christmas tree ornament lit up in space, fragile looking, unquote, against the blackness of the cosmos and desolation of the moon. Later Apollo crews also remarked on the fragile beauty of our planet from space, and all of the missions captured other stunning images, such as Apollo 17 and its full Earth photo. In a sense, by traveling hundreds of thousands of miles to visit the moon, we finally discovered our home, Earth. Having flown in space 4 times, I can tell you from my personal experience that seeing Earth from the vantage point of space truly changes one's perspective. Aboard the space shuttle, I saw the beauty of war-torn parts of our planet appearing peaceful and serene, without borders or boundaries. I also saw the majestic Amazon rainforest devastated by deforestation. My dream is that one day any American will be able to launch into space and see the magnificence of our home planet Earth, as I have been blessed to do. And when that day comes, it will have been the Apollo astronauts whom we honor tonight who blazed the trail. On behalf of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, I would like to again thank the Apollo astronauts for their bravery, dedication, and historic accomplishments. What you achieved will never be forgotten. Centuries from now, future generations will remember it was you who took humankind's first steps beyond our planet. We salute you for all you have done for America and all you have done for the world. Thank you all for helping us celebrate.
As I'm sure you know, decisions at NASA don't happen in a vacuum. Pun intended there, the vacuum of space. I've actually participated in 2 commissions in the service of NASA. One was the Aerospace Commission back in 2001, dubbed the Walker Commission. It was on the Moon to Mars Commission, the Aldrich Commission. And what I remember about those commissions, we were trying to study what is, what should be, what isn't, what's possible. And I remember being bombarded. And one of the commissioners bombarded by the public, people from the aerospace community. Everybody has an idea about what should happen with NASA. Somebody's got a new design for a rocket or a destination or a new propellant. And it was initially kind of annoying. It was like, we're trying to get our job done here. And then I had to pause and step back, and I realized that I don't know many agencies anywhere that has that level of concern expressed by members of the general public. The fact that so many people want to tell NASA what to do, that's not a bad sign, that's a good sign. And there I was being annoyed when, in fact, at the time, I should have celebrated it as an expression of love for the future of NASA, embedded within us all. The agency continues to solicit input from experts. Right now, as you may know, there's a committee for which Norm Augustine is the head, and they are studying the future of the manned spaceflight program at NASA. And so now I can tell you to get online on HSF, human spaceflight, hsf.nasa.gov, and tell them what you think. Do it. How many countries will even allow such a thing, much less have any sense or an idea that you could influence the direction the agency will take? So that's your public service announcement, to get in there and let people know what you think. So 40 years ago, we flew to the moon, expanding a space frontier. The past several years, we've been building a space station. It's expanding an engineering frontier. So we go from 250,000 miles away to a couple hundred miles above Earth in orbit. Tonight, I'll have you know, if you do not otherwise know this, that the crew in the space station now is the largest crew ever, and it has set a record at 13 crew members in orbit in the space station right now. So I just want to give a hand for the... I was trying to think of what you can do with 13 people. Is there some game that takes 13 people? I couldn't. Soccer? Football. One side of a Canadian football. Let's take a look at what's going on up there. We've got some video roll. Roll. Because you may have noticed that last week, a lot happened last week. The weather finally cooperated. Space Shuttle Endeavour set sail on our 23rd mission. This one to the International Space Station and the 6-member Expedition 20 crew. There we go. The 7 members of STS-127 will conduct 5 spacewalks to complete the construction of JAXA's Kibo laboratory. This is Japan Space Agency's Kibo laboratory. And tonight, we're actually going to hear from 2 of the shuttle's astronauts, Commander Mark Polanski and mission specialist David Wolf. STS-127. We've got a video message from them. There's a time delay from orbit till it gets to here, just in case you didn't.
Hi, I'm Mark Polanski, commander of the Space Shuttle Endeavour and STS-127, Purdue University graduate, class of 1978.
I'm Dave Wolf, lead spacewalker for the mission, also a Purdue graduate, 1978.
It was 40 years ago today that we all witnessed the historic landing of Apollo 11 on the moon.
That event inspired us back in school at Purdue like it did all students all over the world. The space program today inspires people everywhere just like it did then. Inspires us on into the future.
So it's only fitting that here we are 40 years later, literally floating on the shoulders of giants who got us to this position today and inspired us. Now we're on the International Space Station, where we have every international partner represented here on the crew today, and a crew of 13 on board. We've been inspired by them, and we thank them for their hard work that got us to this point today. Go Flyers!
And I think we got the point. Purdue is a great school. I think we learned that about this. Neil Armstrong, also a graduate of Purdue University, the Boilermakers. I propose that on the next mission to the space station, they give them a second microphone. I'll donate this one. We wish Endeavour and Expedition 20 all the best. Now, as some of you may know, I'm an astrophysicist, less a space person than a science person. I care about exploding stars, black holes, how to die if you fall in a black hole. That's kind of fun. You want to avoid them if you can. And not all missions, shuttle missions, were to build the space station. One of my favorite recent missions was Atlantis, STS-125. Where did that go? That went to service the Hubble telescope. And you remember, it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. A decision was made to not service the Hubble telescope for the last time. I remember that moment because there was a public outcry. The loudest voices were not even the scientists. It wasn't even members of the space community. It was the public. The public says, no, you're not shutting off our telescope. That may be the first time that has ever happened in the history of the world where the public took ownership of a scientific instrument. Think about that. And how did that happen? Hubble came of age during the internet. Beautiful images come down of our backyard. They end up as screensavers on your computer. They get forwarded in email streams. They get blogged about. Hubble is the public's telescope, and the public voted. Influenced Congress. Congress said, NASA, put the thing back. Put it back. It's a national treasure. And indeed, the final repair mission was reinstated. Let's take a look at some of this footage. There we go. In May, Atlantis' astronauts repaired and upgraded the Hubble Space Telescope. They conducted 5 space walks during their mission to extend the life of the telescope, at least 5 years, possibly 10, literally a new lease on life. They successfully installed 2 new instruments, repaired 2 others, replaced gyroscopes and batteries. They're astronaut surgeons now, a new part of their job description. Added new thermal insulation to protect this telescope, the most celebrated one since the era of Galileo. Remarkable, in fact, that STS-125 is the crowning achievement of what can happen when the manned space program is in symphony with the robotic program. It's a triumph. And by the way, Hubble was not beloved only because it took such great pictures. It's because it got serviced and it was around a long time. We've had other telescopes up there, non-serviced telescopes. You put them up, gyros go out after 3 years, the coolant goes out after 5, it drops in the Pacific after 6. That's not enough time for the public to warm up to it. They don't even know what's going on. The Hubble being serviced multiple times, there are students in high school today that have only ever known life in the presence of the Hubble telescope. Hubble now being up there and working for 17 running years. Remarkable instrument, something we can all and should all be proud of. Tonight, I want to recognize the members of the STS-125 crew for a successful mission. These astronaut surgeons, I want to call them, for their hard work and dedication for a mission which, of course, for some time was in doubt. Please join me in recognizing the crew: the pilot, Gregory Johnson, mission specialist, Michael Good, Megan MacArthur, John Grunsfeld, Mike Massimino, and Andrew Feustel. Where are they? Please stand and be recognized. It's funny because you applaud them for making good pictures you can put on your computer. I applaud them because, like, they give me work to do, right, to figure out the universe. Please welcome STS-125 Mission Commander Scott Altman to tell us a little bit about what kind of surgery he performed.
Well, thank you all very much. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here tonight. I have to admit, when I was assigned to Hubble, I didn't need these glasses or have gray hair, but time has passed on. But it's also very humbling to be present in this company with such great Americans here with us, people who have set the standards. You met my crew a little bit ago. I would like to have been able to take a moment to introduce the rest of the crew, because no one flies in space with just the crew that's there. We took along a piece of all the people who helped train us, who built the tools and the instruments to be installed, the people who watched over us while we were up there, helped answer our questions. They readied the vehicles, 2 vehicles on the pad at the same time for us to be ready to fly in space. They all worked together as a team, a family, to make this mission possible and to keep Hubble alive. Of course, the folks who went before truly know that flying in space is a team sport. Everybody has to work together. We try to build something that future generations can build on, leave something for them, as you have. We stand, as Roman said in his video, on the shoulders of giants, and I'm envious of all that you've given us to go forward with. I have to admit, in another way, I was just having dinner with some people. We met a new couple. She found out I was an astronaut, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, where have you been in space?" So I envy the Apollo generation a destination, and I look forward to having one again. But you did give us that legacy, that foundation, the people who blazed that path to the moon, who first took us into space, who figured out how to do what we needed to do to get to the moon, and then you went out and did it. It's been incredible. I think Shuttle, though, and the Hubble are worthy heirs to that legacy. Hubble began its journey, of course, after a flawless deployment by our new administrator, I have to say that, but began its journey with somewhat of an embarrassment to NASA. The optics were not what we expected, but it's transitioned into a triumph because of the fact that we could go to it and service it, add corrective optics, and then every few years repair the failing parts and inject new technology. We've gotten to the point now where each flight has had its share of challenges. You know, ours certainly did. We launched and 1 second later had a master alarm that got the whole crew on the edge of our seats. In flight, we were faced with bolts that hadn't been turned in 19 years that I thought we were about to break, another handle that we actually had to rip off after a bolt had failed, in order to get to the point where we could do a repair of this mission, where we actually went in and broke new ground, doing card-level repair of an instrument inside a box, inside a telescope, in the middle of space. I think it's amazing that we're able to bring those instruments back to life. And we all, I think, can't wait to see those images. And I think it's those images that reflect, again, another step in exploration. Right now, looking at the images of the Hubble Space Telescope, they take us billions of light years away across our universe to galaxies so far that right now we can only dream of ever visiting them. But that's really where it all began, is with a dream. The dream that started Mercury, Gemini, culminating in Apollo, taking us to the moon. My dream began when I was a 10-year-old boy living in a small town in central Illinois, going outside one warm July night and looking up at the moon and realizing there were humans there now walking on the moon. Now, 40 years later, we look back at that moon, remembering where we have been, and inspired by that effort and the journey that the Hubble telescope can take us on, dreaming of where we will go next. Thank you.
Astronaut surgeons, I love them. Like I said, we've got 13 crew members up there on the International Space Station. And no, they're not at the moon. You know, you say, well, they're not at the moon. They're like going around. But there are people there who are inspired by the moon voyage. Expedition 20 crew wants us to know that they're inspired by the Apollo achievements and that legacy of exploration and discovery. Chief Science Officer and Flight Engineer Michael Barrett says they have a memento, kind of like a keepsake, to help keep them motivated. Let's roll that video.
Greetings to all of the distinguished guests in attendance. I'm Mike Barrett, NASA's flight engineer aboard the International Space Station. I'm part of the multinational Expedition 20 crew flying 220 miles above the Earth. For more than 3.5 billion years, this rock was on the moon. Then 40 years ago, Neil and Buzz picked it up and brought it back to Earth. It has spent the past 4 decades in the Lunar Sample Laboratory in Houston. In March, this rock was brought by the Space Shuttle Discovery here to the International Space Station, the first stop in America's return to the moon. It was brought here as a symbol of NASA's resolve to successfully carry out America's plan to build a new generation of spacecraft for a new generation of explorers. This rock will be returned to Earth later this year, and then displayed as a reminder to those working on our new spacecraft of what can be achieved with innovation and sheer will. This rock also will be displayed around the country to serve as a symbol for all Americans of the fortitude of our nation as we press forward in space. And when Americans return to the moon, a piece of this rock will go with them to be returned to its home. It's an important reminder that America's commitment to human exploration did not end with the 12 astronauts who walked on the lunar surface. Apollo was just the beginning. We're at a bold new threshold of exploration and discovery, and all of us who are part of NASA today are proud not only to honor the achievements of Apollo, but to be a part of the next important pioneering steps in humanity's ongoing journey to the stars.
I like this first word to us there. It was greetings. You know what's supposed to follow that, right? Greetings, Earthlings, right? But he didn't say it. I wanted him to. You know, inspiration reveals itself in a lot of ways. There's a moon rock in orbit adjacent to astronauts conducting their missions. I was born the same week that NASA was founded. So I feel NASA. We're kind of like, how you doing, NASA? You know, how's your gray hair coming along? How you doing? There's someone else my age who, in fact, we lost too soon, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, another sort of icon of our culture. I bring him up in this occasion only to say that we're the same age, so we're exposed to cultural forces at the same time, with the same force of influence on our lives. As you know, Michael Jackson was a great singer and a performer and a dancer. And so he performed this dance move. He could have called it, you know, the Jackson slide, with the floater steps, the ice glide. He could have called it anything, but he didn't. He called it the moonwalk, okay? That's what he did, all right? He called it the moonwalk. The moonwalk. I haven't checked Neil Armstrong to see if he could do that. But the point of inspiration in our lives, it can come from anywhere. And space operates on us in our hearts and our souls and our minds and our creativity. It's not just the results of a science experiment. It's not just a rock. It's space embedded within our culture. couple of things I noted as I reviewed the missions. For the longest while, there was the contest of who could build the tallest building. And you go back far enough, you get the pyramids. Pyramids were pretty tall. Do you know the next tallest building after the pyramids? Anybody know? The Eiffel Tower. That's how long it took to build something taller than the pyramids. You climb to the top, you're far away from Earth. Then we had the Mercury astronauts going into orbit. Then we had the Apollo astronauts going to the moon. Not all Apollo astronauts share the distance record from Earth. That goes to only one mission, Apollo 13. Because Apollo 13 went to the moon during apogee, when the moon in its elliptical orbit around the Earth was at its farthest from the Earth. That mission went to the moon at its farthest. We have Apollo 13 astronauts here in the audience. I have to publicly ask them, as you went the figure-8 journey around the moon, who was on the left side of the capsule? Because you've got the distance record from Earth as you swung around the back way. Another favorite of mine is, people say, the first comments from the moon were, tranquility base here, the eagle has landed. But the very first word from the moon, of the comments from the moon, Texans know, is Houston. First words from the moon in comments. Actually, the first words were contact light, but that's not interesting. All right? After that, they're planted down, they look around, they're safe. Houston, tranquility base here. The eagle has landed. The name of the next generation lunar module is Altair. If you know your constellations, Altair is the brightest star of the constellation Aquila, the eagle. There is method to this madness. Inspirations come from all sorts of things, but I think the one we all point most to is John Kennedy's words. Spoken not only in the joint session of Congress in May 1961, another brilliant speech he gave was in the Rice Stadium in Houston, Texas. Let's take a look at that clip.
Exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
Not only do you want to be a part of it, you want to lead it. 5 years ago in this very building, NASA announced the creation of a special honor, the Ambassador of Exploration Award. This award is not given out every year. It's not given out to just anyone. The award is a small sample of lunar soil, a rock, parts of the 840 pounds of rocks that have come from the moon during the 6 expeditions there. And it's presented, not every year, presented to honor the first generation of explorers and to renew our commitment to expand that enterprise. Tonight, it's our honor to present the next Ambassador of Exploration Award to the family of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Please join me in welcoming the President's niece and former Maryland Lieutenant Governor Kathleen Kennedy Townsend to the stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that warm introduction, and
thank each of you. For you, the people of NASA are the real ambassadors to space and exploration, and I am so honored to be in your presence this evening. Everybody is referring to the past, so I'm going to tell you about when I was young. I was 9 years old on May 5th, 1961, when Navy Commander Alan Shepard became the first American to make a flight into space. I was at Our Lady of Victory School on MacArthur Boulevard here in Washington, D.C. with 40 kids. That's when you could have 40 kids in a class. It's because you had a nun at the top of the classroom. And the 40 of us gathered around a black and white TV with a Mickey Mouse antenna and watched Alan Shepard. We were in awe. It was so exciting. It was also the time at the height of the Cold War when we were wondering whether the United States was going to win or whether the Soviets were. It was also very scary. But just 20 days after we watched Alan Shepard go into space, my uncle, John Kennedy, went to Congress and said, as we've all heard tonight, we're going to land a man on the moon in this decade. Now, I have to tell you, in the family that I grew up in, we were taught to believe adults. And I was wondering, does he know what he's talking about? Does he know how far away the moon is? I was really worried that he had made a promise that he couldn't succeed. But the fact is, he knew NASA, and he knew they could do the job. He quoted William Bradford in that Rice speech, who's speaking in 1630 at the founding of the Plymouth Bay Colony, said that all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with awesome courage. NASA has both enterprise and courage, and because of President Kennedy's vision and the nation's support, you reached the moon. Congratulations. In the years that followed Neil Armstrong taking us to the Sea of Tranquility, people throughout the world have watched in awe as the NASA space program has explored the unknown, constantly pushing the boundaries forward, constantly asking why not. Many times we've been proud to celebrate your victories and shared with you in the sadness and tragedy of your losses. But we've always been inspired by your accomplishments. And as we heard earlier this evening, through the Hubble spacecraft and the amazing internet, all of us can participate and feel once again that we're part of the enterprise that is NASA. I think as we think about the future of NASA, it's good to also remember the other words of John Kennedy at Rice University. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win and others too. You know, we have a lot of challenges right now in our country and in our world in which we need the spirit that brought NASA to the moon, that takes the belief that we can use science for the good of humankind, whether it be to solve the problems of global climate change, or whether it be to solve the problems of AIDS or other pandemics, or whether it is to make sure that all the people throughout the world can have food and clean water. That ideal that inspired us in the 1960s can come again in this century and at this time and say to us once again that there is no problem beyond our ability, no issue that we can't solve without determination, ingenuity, imagination that NASA shows us this country has. Good luck, and thank you for all you've done.
I'd like to invite Administrator Bolden to the stage, along with the crew of Apollo 11, Commander Neil Armstrong, Commander Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Buzz Aldrin to help present the Ambassador of Exploration Award.
Excuse me, can Max Paul come up? He is from Rice University, who is an engineering student at Rice.
Your Honor, it is indeed a pleasure for me to present, along with the crew of Apollo 11, the Ambassador of Exploration Award. This lunar sample is presented in honor of President John F. Kennedy, whose exceptional vision led America to the moon. We present this award on behalf of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration on the 40th anniversary of the first lunar landing. July 20th, 2009 is the date we're presenting it. Congratulations and thank you for joining us tonight to share in this historic moment.
Thank you so much. On behalf of my family, I'm very, very grateful. When they told me I would get a moon rock, I was really excited. And I was going to put it on my mantelpiece. You're not laughing. But I was told I was not allowed to do that. So I thought, what would be the appropriate place for the moon rock to go? And I thought, at Rice University, where President Kennedy inspired so many with that speech, and where he spoke to young people what they could do. And here to accept, on behalf of Rice University, is Max Paul, who is an engineering student and wanted to study space engineering when he first got to Rice. So, for Rice, and for all that that represents, thank you very much. Now we have to put it back.
We're almost done here. Our final guest speaker tonight was part of NASA long before there was actually really a NASA, a formal NASA. He was a naval aviator, the youngest pilot in his squadron. Neil Armstrong flew 78 combat missions during the Korean War. Let's take a look at what that landing site on the moon looks like. Because some people believe that, we just strapped the astronauts to a rocket and just fired them to the moon. But, there's a lot of image reconnaissance that goes into planning these journeys. For example, this is an image taken of the Apollo 11 landing site in 1967 from one of the Lunar Orbiter 5 spacecraft sent to study the moon. The photograph is part of the Lunar Orbiter Image Recovery Project located at NASA Ames Research Center. If you fast forward 43 years, Friday, last week was a big week, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, returned its first imagery of the Apollo 11 landing site. In this photo, you can just make out something NASA left behind. As you know, LRO is the next step in returning astronauts to the moon. It's a robotic scout helping to find the best places to explore. In this image, you can just make out Eagle's descent stage. Oh, we just finished that. By the way, it's LRO's first attempt, and future images will be even better. And by the way, those images are publicly available, and you can show them to anyone who somehow still believes that we faked it all. So let's hear from someone who's had a bird's eye view of the Sea of Tranquility as well as a moonwalker's view. The man with firsthand experience to the moon and back. Please welcome Neil Armstrong.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Whenever I come to this city, and if I have 20 minutes to spare, I come to this building. Not necessarily to look at craft hanging from the ceiling and sitting on the floors, but to absorb by osmosis or radiation or some unknown mechanism, some of the history that resides here. And it must have worked, because one young man recently said to me, "Pop, your history." So let me take 1 minute to recount some of those flights that you saw in the video earlier. 40 winters have passed since the first manned flights of the Apollo spacecraft. And so let's just kind of return to that remarkable time between October of 1968 and November of 1969. Those 13 months began with the first manned Apollo flight, which demonstrated the ability of its command module to fly longer than a duration of a round trip to the moon. Just 2 months later, second flight, in a remarkably bold move, flew to and orbited the moon. The third flight, in Earth orbit, tested the lunar module in its inaugural flight. 2 months later, the fourth flight took a lunar module to lunar orbit in a dress rehearsal that demonstrated the ability of mission control to communicate and track two vehicles in different orbits about the moon. The fifth flight completed the final step, demonstrating the ability to descend to, land on, and return from the moon to lunar orbit. The sixth flight, the last flight of 1969, was nearly operational, landing on the lunar surface precisely alongside the Surveyor 3 spacecraft, which had arrived there 2.5 years earlier. No flight test program of any complex flying machine was ever conducted so efficiently and with such a small number of flights. 6 more, ever more complex and difficult flights would continue the Apollo exploration program over the following 3 years. Those successes were very impressive 40 years ago, but they were not miraculous. They were the result of the imagination and inventive minds of the people in the Apollo project since its inception 8 years earlier. Those years engendered some of the most challenging, most difficult, and most productive work in the history of modern engineering. 8 years, including a year and a half of redesign as a consequence of those deficiencies that were responsible for the tragic and fatal fire of the Apollo 1 spacecraft. Creating a strategy, a configuration, and the craft to carry men to the moon was staggeringly complex. It required the very best in creativity, determination, and perseverance that could be assembled in the American workplace. Seldom in recorded history have so many government employees so intensely and for such long hours worked at their chores. And seldom have so many aerospace industry engineers and craftsmen been so careful, so diligent, and so determined. It was a superb national enterprise. Our knowledge of the moon increased 1,000-fold and more. Techniques were developed for interplanetary navigation and travel. Our home planet has been seen from afar, and that perspective has caused us to think about its and our significance. Children, inspired by the excitement of spaceflight, have come to appreciate the wonder of science, the beauty of mathematics, and the precision of engineering. Young minds in our own country and around the world now believe they can do great things, and they can, if they apply themselves as intensely as the Apollo workforce did 4 decades ago. Tonight, we remember a special time. We remember a time of passion for perfection. We remember a level of achievement which really surprised us all. Human interest and media coverage this month confirmed that many others remember that time and remember Apollo with some warmth and even a little admiration. It left a lasting imprint on society and history. Tonight, we remember and congratulate all those who made it possible. Apollo was a good thing to do.
For me, one of the most interesting features about NASA is that there are 10 centers scattered across the country. And if you grow up in the neighborhoods where those centers are located, you either have a relative who works for NASA or you know somebody who works for NASA. And in every community that I have seen, that is a point of pride in those communities, if you work for NASA. And that sense of participation, of common journey, is something without which This would be an enterprise just for the few, rather than for the entire nation. There were engineers and administrators and other workers from the Apollo era who are actually still working at NASA today, some of whom are here in this room right now. And there are others who are of that era who are not the astronauts, but who know the important ways that they contributed. Because in fact, there's this pyramid, and at the base of that pyramid are the thousands of engineers and scientists laying out the groundwork for what those moon voyages were all about. And you work your way up the pyramid, and the astronauts are at the top. They're the brave ones putting their life at risk, trusting what the rest of that pyramid provided. So I want to take this opportunity, an opportunity not often granted, to have those people who worked on the Apollo mission but who are not astronauts. If you're in this room, please stand and be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, NASA is a force of nature. It operates on our hearts, on our minds, on the educational pipeline, all for 1/2 of 1 cent on the dollar, on the tax dollar. Remarkable how many people think NASA's budget is bigger than that. I want to start a movement where government agencies got paid the budget people think they're getting. NASA's budget would go up by a factor of 10. And that factor is a measure of the visibility of every dollar of NASA that gets spent. And that's an extraordinarily compliment that people think NASA's budget is bigger than it is. Because it builds future explorers, we know this. But not just explorers for our culture, it is something built into what it is to be human. And I wouldn't give that up for anything, lest we just stop advancing all the things that we've come to value as Americans in the 20th and 21st century. So as this evening and the program comes to a close, the entertainment actually continues. We have a Steinway grand piano sitting to my right that will soon get occupied. But before that happens, I just want to thank you for allowing me to share this night, this very special night, with all of you. Thank you all for that. It's my pleasure to introduce Grammy Award-winning pianist and entertainer. We are thrilled to have her with us tonight. Please welcome Diana Krall, who will play appropriately themed music to this evening. Diana.
So much to me. Can you hear me okay? I was 5 years old and remembering I'm from Vancouver Island, but I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, not when I was 5, a little later on. And it didn't happen for me, but I practiced the piano more, but I loved science, and my mother bought me my first book, Carrying the Fire, when I was 13. And my confirmation day, I built a rocket ship out of some paper towel tubing and out of a kit, and put it together with my Canadian 4-wheel drive, hooked it up, sent it up, and was always interested in the space program. My dear friend Robert Thirsk is a Canadian astronaut who's in the ISS right now, and he sent a message. Tonight they are celebrating with a commemorative dinner. Our present day, please tell your hosts that the station and shuttle crews are doing well. Our present day activities in space would not be possible without the heroic accomplishments of the Apollo astronauts and the inspiration they provided. I have a very lovely tattoo on my arm, Thirsk ISS, with the Canadian Thunderbird and the moon. It'll never leave my arm. I promise, Bob. So this means more to me, and my children are 2.5-year-old twin boys who had swimming lessons yesterday, and with their Buzz Lightyears, their swimming teacher said, Buzz floats in the water. And my son Frank said, Buzz doesn't float, he flies. He's a star commander. And they've been here, they've been to this beautiful place before I have. And it is my joy and my great honor to play for you fine gentlemen. It's very emotional for me. I lay awake in my hotel room last night for a very long time, thinking about how often I've played these songs and how my children say to me, I can see the moon, Mummy, and how much the moon means to me in so many ways, and how much you mean to me and inspired me. And I'm an artist. I'm not a scientist. But you've inspired me. And I wish I could play some Merle Haggard for you and some Berlioz and some other things, but this is what I have to give, and I thank you so very much for inviting me here tonight. And I wear my tattoo proudly. Stars, let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling, kiss me. Fill my life with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling, kiss me. Fill my life with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, in other words, in other words, I love you. Thank you. This is also a